All right, we are talking clowns and cornfields. Full disclaimer going into this review, I have not read the book. Don't be mad at me. It's a book I've been aware of for several years now. I knew it was a young adult novel, and my impression of it is that it was a book more geared towards like middle schoolers or maybe young high schoolers, which I guess is why I never gravitated to it. However, I have since learned that while it is a YA book, it does deal with some more heavier themes. It does have more heavier scenes. I'll get to the book at some point, but just know that going into this review, I had no prior knowledge of it. Hello everybody, my name is Kat and welcome back to my channel where we talk about all things horror. I'm going to try to keep this a spoiler-free review. I might get into some details about some of the scenes, none of the like big reveals or any of that, but as always, I will say beforehand when I'm going to get into more spoilery parts of the review, so you can skip ahead if you don't want to know anything about certain scenes going into the film. But let's get into Clown in a Cornfield. Now, I had no idea that this was a Shudder release. I was under the impression that this was a bigger Hollywood studio doing this adaptation just because, again, I know the book is very popular and Hollywood is all about that IP. This is being distributed by Shudder in conjunction with, is it RLJE Pictures? If you explore the Shudder catalog and specifically look at a lot of Shudder originals, this company tends to help distribute these types of lower budget horror films. And admittedly, when I see their logo pop up and it is a Shudder original, I tend to get a little nervous, just like a little bit. I've done plenty of reviews on this channel talking about Shudder originals. They're not always my favorite, I'll just say that. However, when Shudder feels pretty good about a film that they have, they do tend to wide release it into theaters. That's usually like how you can tell if something's actually worth watching. This is directed by Eli Craig. Oh, I think my lighting changed. Feels like more in line with the color palette of the film, so we'll go with it. This is a film directed by Eli Craig, who is most known for Tucker and Dale versus Evil. So going into it and knowing that he was behind it, I was like, okay, this is probably gonna have more of a self-aware meta type humor to it. It's probably going to be a film that is not taking itself too seriously, which honestly, with a concept like this, with a title like Clown in a Cornfield, how serious can you really get? And you know, I was kind of into it. I was like, you know what? I'm totally ready to just like sit down in a theater and just watch a fun slasher movie. This film is exactly what you think it's going to be going into it. Do I think it's going to be in my top 5 favorite horror films of 2025? Probably not. I enjoyed the film enough for what it was. It wasn't anything particularly mind-blowing, not really reinventing anything here. I don't know if it's necessarily a film I would go back to. Maybe if I was in the mood and I just wanted to watch like films that had that kind of fall Halloween vibe, I might throw it on in the background. I'm not quite sure how it will hold up on a rewatch value, only because I feel like the one thing that really does keep you interested in the film, and again, this is speaking of someone that has like no idea what the plot was going into it, was the mystery surrounding the actual clowns and kind of figuring out what the hell is actually going on here. Once you know what the reveal is, I'm not sure if the film is going to have the same impact upon a rewatch. But you know, for the hour and a half that I was sitting there, I was having fun with it. I was like, yeah, you know, this is cute. I say cute, I don't mean that in a derogatory way. I think if you're a fan of the book, I think if you're a fan of the source material, you might enjoy this a little bit more. Just looking at brief comments online of people who've seen the movie, it seems like the film is fairly faithful to the book. Do I think you need to run out in theaters and see this? Again, I would say if you're a fan of the source material, you probably already know whether or not you want to go see this film in a theater. If you're someone that's like, I just want to go see a slasher film in a movie theater, then I would say maybe do a matinee or like one of the cheap weeknight showings. However, if you're just like kind of casually interested and you don't really feel like one way or the other about needing to see this film right away, I would say you could probably wait for it to come on streaming. You can wait for it to come on Shudder. I'm going to guess they're probably going to put it on Shudder in the fall. So just getting into some of the more specific specifics of it, and again, I'm going to try to avoid spoilers. It is a humorous film. It is definitely a film that is winking at you, at the audience. It's not completely like a meta comedy, kind of postmodern comedy that you would see in something like a Scream movie, nor is it like really over the top or kind of annoying with its references, which I really appreciated, because I do feel like sometimes films that want to have this self-referential spin on them, sometimes they can almost go like too far where it just gets a little annoying. But I felt like this film, it works because it plays it straight while still being in on the joke. So you definitely have the classic slasher tropes here. You definitely have those archetypes, and they are very much exaggerated. You have like the two kind of dumb popular girls. They're just saying very ridiculous things throughout the whole movie. You have like the jock guy who's all like buff and it's like, yeah, look at these guns. It's like those types of characters. And again, we've seen it before. The film isn't particularly doing anything new here. Again, sometimes the humor landed for me and sometimes it didn't. There were moments where it felt a little forced. Although I will say, at my screening, I did have a group of teenage girls that were sitting behind me. They were definitely laughing at a lot of the moments in the movie. So for them, it worked. And I think they're probably more the target audience for this film than I am. Anyway, I think too with the humor aspect, I think some of the reasons why sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't is really dependent on the character. Like, admittedly, I just found a lot of the teenage characters that are in this like friend group just kind of annoying, which I feel like was intentional. They did kind of come off as those slasher type characters where they're just so annoying that you're just actively waiting for them to get killed. That being said, I did really like the final girl here, Quinn, who is played by Katie Douglas. I thought she did a great job. She's definitely your typical moody teenager whose mother has recently passed away. She's trying to take care of her dad. Her dad is forcing her to move to this new town. You know, she had her kind of annoying teen girl moments, but again, that was very much trying to be part of the joke and related to the larger themes of the film. And I also really liked the relationship that she has with her father throughout the film. I did really think there's a nice arc in their relationship between when they're starting out in the film. A lot of miscommunication, a lot of misunderstanding between the two of them. And then you get to see that relationship evolve over the film, which I thought was really nice. Watching the film and then thinking about it afterwards, I was going back to my review that I did last week of Until Dawn, mainly because these are similar in the fact that they are based off of a very popular IP that gained an audience through word of mouth on the internet and going viral on the internet. And I was trying to think, like, why did this film work a little bit better than Until Dawn? A couple of things. One, it's that Clown in a Cornfield definitely has a more consistent tone to it throughout the whole film, right? One of my things I talked about in my review last week of Until Dawn was that movie just felt all over the place tonally. Like, it didn't really know if it wanted to be a serious horror film or if it wanted to have more comedic moments to it. Whereas here, like, it's consistent, right? It keeps that same brand of humor from the start of the film until the end of the film. And then I also think in terms of, again, the character development and the themes, this one did it so much better. And I think it had like genuine twists as far as the character development goes. You're presented with one character and you think they're a certain way, right? You think they're a certain archetype, whether that's like the bad boy. And then by the end, you learn like what's actually going on with them. And I think it adds to a story in a way that at least made me feel more invested in these characters, because then I was like, oh, okay, I want to see like where this goes from here. I was not expecting this. I think there's a lot stronger themes in this film as well. There's like different layers that you can look at what this film is talking about. I think the main theme here is this idea of like generational gaps.
Where's the button, Jen? What is this? What kind of phone is this?
There's definitely like the youth versus older adults narrative that's happening. There's definitely the teenagers being pouty and being like, why don't the adults understand me? And then on the other side of it, you have the adults who are just like, what is up with kids these days? I'm just kind of thinking that they're troublemakers, that they're always up to no good, that they are disrespectful of the older people in the town, that they're disrespectful of the town's customs. This is taking place in a small Midwestern town in which tradition and customs are very much in the fabric of the values of the town, still very much caught up in the traditions and the customs of the past and not really wanting to evolve or expand beyond that. As someone who grew up in a small rural town, I definitely understood the feeling of some of the characters. And I definitely had those experiences in high school as well, where it's like you have certain kids who seem like they're upholding the more traditional values of the town, right? You have a teen character in this film that very much represents that, and the cooler kids refer to him as like the redneck. He's the kid that like goes hunting, and again, very much embodying this kind of rural archetype. I definitely had kids like that when I went to high school, and then you have the other set of kids who, you know, just want to move beyond this, who want to evolve and change and not be a part of this small town mindset, that feel very bogged down by the adults in the town who are trying to instill these values or these points of views they don't necessarily agree with onto them. And because they reject these values and point of view, that makes them very suspicious to the adults of the town. You could, if you wanted to, put a more like political filter on this, at least speaking in the US. That's a discussion that's definitely happening here in terms of politicians and how we have certain politicians that very much want to go back to this like idealized version of the past, and again bring in those like values of the past that, you know, worked for them and their families growing up. And then you have the other side of people who are like, you know what, those values don't match up with me. You could, if you wanted to, also look at it through that lens. I'm not sure if that is what the author of the book originally intended. So themes that do feel very relevant today. Although I do have to say, and this is going to get into slight spoilers, just like talking about some stuff that happens at the beginning of the film, but again, if you want to skip ahead, I'll leave a timestamp somewhere down here where you can skip ahead to. While I understand the gap between the generations and I understand the kids not trusting the adults in this town, there's a lot of emphasis on the fact of the adults in this town are so mean. Why don't they understand us? It seems like they're just out to get us all the time. It's like, I kind of get that, but also at the same time, these kids were kind of assholes. They were also mean at certain parts in the film. You get scenes of them pulling pranks on their teacher, and then the teacher gets upset and gives them detention, and then they're like, I can't believe this teacher gave us detention, one asshole. And it's like, well, yeah, I mean, what did you expect when you're like pulling a prank on him? And it was kind of an elaborate one too. Maybe this is better like set up in the book, that like these kids are acting out because the adults were being so harsh to them first, but the way that it's presented in the film, yeah, these kids just kind of came off like assholes, and again, they were kind of annoying, and again, I was kind of just waiting for the clowns to show up and kill all of them. It wasn't quite like something like, to use another killer clown movie like Stephen King's It, where again you have this small town and you have this evil that's like permeating through this town, and you have the adults who are very much choosing to turn a blind eye to a lot of the horrific violence that is happening in this town, and a lot of horrific violence that is happening to the children in the town. It's not even just like Pennywise himself, but it's also just like these everyday atrocities of like kids bullying other kids, or there being neglect and abuse happening in the town. I know in the books and in the movies, there's discussions of like adults in the town actively witnessing something horrific, or someone being bullied, or, you know, an act of violence taking place, and the town adults just choosing to ignore it, right, and not do anything about it. And so you kind of like get more of the struggle of like the children in the town versus the adults, because the adults are just like completely useless. So I feel like something like that works a little bit better in terms of just showing the dangers of growing up to be a cynical adult and just going with the status quo. I think another book that did this well that's coming to mind is something like Grady Hendrix' My Best Friend's Exorcism. That was another story that dealt a lot with adults in the town who are just actively ignoring the fact that terrible things are happening to their children, right? And again, very much just wanting to stick to the status quo, keep up appearances, act like everything is perfect and fine. Clown in Cornfield, the movie, at least, like it felt like it wanted to kind of go in that direction as well. Again, I didn't quite buy it as much as with these other stories that I just talked about. That was kind of one of the parts of the story that just felt a little forced, of a lot of exposition of the kids being like, the adults in this town are mean and bad. But again, all the actions at least for the first two parts of the movie, it's like, well, yeah, you guys are acting like brats. Like, what do you expect? Moving on to the actual clowns themselves. So again, if you're not familiar with the source material and you're going into this hoping that you're going to get clown action on the same level as something like a Pennywise or even Art the Clown or even something like Killer Clowns from Outer Space, you're not going to quite get that. I think the clowns here serve a different purpose. It's a creepy clown movie to a certain extent, but I do feel like the film is more interested in some of these other themes that I just touched upon. And then as far as like the gore goes, I found the first part of this movie to be really tame. It felt like a lot of the killings were actually happening off screen, which was kind of lame. And I was like, is this a PG-13 film? But it's not. So I guess maybe it was just like budgetary restraints. I did think that the gore got better towards the end of the film. Like they definitely do save some of the bigger special effects for the finale. Some of it looked like CGI. I don't know if it was. I might be wrong on that, but there were just some like explosions of blood where I was like, is that real? I actually do think Until Dawn did better in the gore department than this film does, and I do know that Until Dawn used more practical effects. Kills were like fine. If you want to go into a movie to see like a bunch of creative kills, then just wait for Final Destination to come out in a few days. And then yeah, my only other critique is that while I do feel like this film was stronger than something like an Until Dawn in terms of the characters and the themes, the narrative is still a little paper thin here. We still are getting a lot of stuff explained to us through exposition. I do feel like the strength of this movie is in its visuals and in just like the vibes that it's giving us. This is definitely a film that is leaning into that nostalgia, that is leaning into that fall feeling. There's a lot of like really just great visual moments where you are in like the cornfield and it's dark and you just see this like clown figure coming out of the corn, and it is very creepy. Like a lot of those shots in itself are very unsettling. This definitely feels like a story that was inspired by all of those like random clown appearances in like, what was it, 2017? Y'all remember that, when there were just like random clowns popping up in various places and like chasing people? As far as like tone and mood, this film was really reminding me a lot of Eli Roth's Thanksgiving. Didn't that film also have something to do with like a Founders Day celebration and parades and people getting killed horribly during a parade? There were some narrative elements that felt very similar to that film, and again, just in the visuals of it, of having this very like vintage autumnal vibe going on. Also, speaking of the Founders Day celebration, so there's like the mayor of the town who comes from this long line of family members who very much helped establish the town and very much helped establish the industry and agriculture around the town, right? So old money type of character. The mayor is also the father of one of the primary teenage characters. Again, they have a very strife relationship with each other. But the father character is played by Kevin Durand, who last time I saw him was in Abigail. But I always laugh every time he shows up. I think he's a great actor. I really enjoy his presence, but he just looks so much like Elon Musk. Again, it's kind of funny when considering some of the themes of the film and whether or not you want to take a more political reading of the themes in the movie. If it was intentional, then it worked. It was pretty funny. So yeah, overall, like, I had fun watching this movie. Again, I don't think it's anything that mind-blowing. I do feel like I might have liked this film a little bit more if I did watch it like during the fall time. This would have been the perfect type of film to go see in that transition where summer is ending, fall is starting, it's starting to get a little bit nippier in the air, you're starting to get into that like spooky season mood. Whereas now, you know, seeing it at the beginning of May, like the semester's wrapping up for me, my head is in summer vacation mode, getting killed, getting slashed up at the summer camp type vibes. Like that's more where my head is going right now. I wasn't really quite in the mood for like an autumn type film. I don't know why Shudder always does this. I feel like they always put their more like fall Halloween type movies out in the summer. They did that last year too with Late Night with the Devil. I mean, I'm sure it's so that they can get those films up on their platform by that time, but still, I did enjoy the film enough that I'm interested in going out and reading the book. Yeah, I might add it to my fall reading list this year. And those are my thoughts on Clown in a Cornfield. Next week we have Final Destination Bloodlines coming out, and I am so excited. Like, that to me is the perfect way to kick off the summer season. So I will see you all next time for that. In the meantime, if you've seen Clown in a Cornfield or if you've read the book, drop your thoughts in the comments down below. Let me know what you thought, and I will see you next time. Thank you so much for watching.